What you're about to witness is one of the most jaw-dropping moments of courtroom justice ever caught on camera. When a 42-year-old city fire chief, once hailed as a local hero, walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom with arrogance instead of honor, he made the single biggest mistake of his career. He thought his connections to City Hall could intimidate a judge. He thought his service medals made him untouchable. But what unfolded next shattered that illusion completely, turning a routine parking violation into a career-ending scandal that would expose corruption running straight through Providence's political core. This story is a reminder of what happens when duty turns into entitlement, when a badge meant for service becomes a shield for abuse, and when someone forgets that no amount of rank or recognition places them above the law. Because in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, power doesn't protect arrogance, it humbles it. And respect for justice will always outrank connections, politics, or privilege. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this deserve to reach everyone who still believes that true authority is earned, not inherited, and that judges like Frank Caprio remind the world what justice with integrity truly looks like. It's a cold Tuesday morning in March, and Providence Municipal Court is preparing for another session. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the courtroom doors swing wide with authority. In strides Fire Chief Daniel Morrison, and this man doesn't just walk into a room, he commands it. Morrison is 42 years old, standing 6'2", with the build of someone who still trains like he's fighting fires on the front lines. His Providence Fire Department dress uniform is immaculate, every crease razor sharp, every button polished to a mirror shine. Across his chest, 5 rows of service ribbons tell the story of 2 decades of firefighting, including 3 life-saving medals that catch the courtroom lights. But it's not just the uniform that commands attention. It's Morrison's posture, shoulders pulled back, chin elevated just slightly too high, hands swinging with practiced authority. On his left hip, clearly visible, is his fire department badge, positioned prominently like a shield against accountability. His face carries the weathered confidence of a man who's used to being called a hero. And when he removes his fire chief's cap, his movements are precise, deliberate, but not humble. As he approaches the defendant's stand, Morrison strides with the bearing of someone who believes this is all a formality. Each step of his polished leather shoes clicks authoritatively against the courtroom floor, announcing his presence. What Morrison doesn't realize is that he's about to face Judge Frank Caprio, who has handled over 400,000 cases in his 35 years on the bench and can spot abuse of authority from across a crowded courtroom. But here's what nobody knows yet. This case isn't really about a parking violation. It's about a pattern of behavior that the Providence Fire Department has been quietly trying to address for months. Deputy Chief Maria Santos has quietly slipped into the back row to watch her boss's hearing, concerned about what she knows is coming. Chief Morrison, the court clerk, announces, "Chief Daniel Morrison, violation of Rhode Island General Law, Title 31, Section 27 to 19, unauthorized use of emergency vehicle." Morrison steps forward casually, resting one hand on the defendant's stand like he's claiming territory rather than answering charges. Judge Caprio looks up with those experienced eyes that have learned to read people in the first 3 seconds. He sees Morrison's posture, the displayed badges, the subtle arrogance. "Chief Morrison," Judge Caprio begins, "you're charged with parking a fire department vehicle, SUB 3, assigned to your office, in a no-parking zone on Benefit Street on February 28th at 2:47 p.m. The fine is $85. How do you plead?" What happens next makes the court clerk's fingers freeze. "Your Honor," Morrison begins with condescension barely concealed, I'm pleading not guilty because this citation represents a fundamental misunderstanding of fire department operational protocols and the authority granted to command-level personnel under Emergency Services Statute 2328.6. Judge Caprio sets down his pen slowly. That gesture that signals someone has just made a serious miscalculation. Chief Morrison, were you responding to an emergency at the time? Your Honor, fire chiefs maintain constant operational readiness. We don't simply respond to emergencies, we prevent them through strategic positioning. It's a concept that requires understanding emergency management complexities. The subtle condescension hangs in the air. Judge Caprio's eyes narrow slightly. Chief Morrison, were you at 2:47 p.m. actively responding to a fire, medical emergency, or any situation requiring immediate emergency response? Morrison's jaw tightens, the first crack in his confidence. Your Honor, I was conducting official fire department business? Official business? Can you describe the nature of this business? I was meeting with a city official regarding fire safety compliance. I see. And which city official were you meeting with? Morrison hesitates. Barely half a second, but Caprio catches it. That's a private matter, Your Honor. I don't see how it's relevant. Morrison has just told a judge that he doesn't get to determine relevance in his own courtroom. Actually, Chief Morrison, what's relevant in my courtroom is determined by me. Now, official government business isn't private. Which city official were you meeting with? Morrison's hands gripped the railing. Now, Your Honor, I believe my meeting schedule falls under executive confidentiality. Executive confidentiality? Judge Caprio repeats slowly. Chief Morrison, you're not the president. You're a municipal fire chief. Either this was official business, in which case you can tell me who you met, or it was personal, in which case you had no authorization to use a city vehicle. Which is it? And guys, if you're feeling the tension building, if you sense Morrison walked into a trap, hit that like button now, because what Judge Caprio discovers next will expose a scandal reaching into the city hall. Highest levels of Providence government. Morrison's face flushes. Your Honor, I resent the implication. I've served this city for 20 years. I've saved lives. I have 3 life-saving medals and commendations from 5 mayors. I think my record speaks to my character. Morrison has pulled the hero card, suggesting past service should exempt him from current accountability. Chief Morrison, Judge Caprio says, like a disappointed father, your service record is admirable, but your medals don't answer why you were parked illegally on Benefit Street at 2:47 p.m. Who were you meeting with? The silence stretches. Morrison looks around, his eyes briefly meeting Deputy Chief Santos in the back row. What he sees there, embarrassment and resignation, deflates him. Your Honor, I'd prefer not to disclose. So you're refusing to answer? That's not what I meant. Then answer the question, Chief. The meeting was personal in nature, so it wasn't official business. Not in the technical sense, but as fire chief, I maintain relationships that benefit the department. Even when not conducting specific business, I'm always representing the department's interests. So let me understand. You took a city vehicle for personal business, but argue that because you're always representing the department, your personal business counts as official. Is that correct? Morrison hears his logic repeated in plain language and realizes the absurdity. Your Honor, you're oversimplifying. No, Chief, I'm clarifying. But I'll give you one more chance. Where on Benefit Street were you parked, and who were you visiting? Morrison knows he's trapped. I was parked outside 247 Benefit Street. And who resides there? The question lands like a bomb because Caprio clearly already knows. Sarah Castellano. And who is Sarah Castellano? She's the wife of Councilman Robert Castellano. The courtroom explodes. People turning to each other, whispering urgently. Deputy Chief Santos drops her head into her hands. The court clerk's mouth falls open. Judge Caprio lets the moment breathe. So to be clear, at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, you took a city vehicle, told your office you were conducting official business, and drove to a city councilman's wife's private residence, correct? Yes, Your Honor. And what was the nature of your visit? I don't see how that's relevant to parking. Chief Morrison, you've argued your city vehicle use was justified because of city business. Now I'm asking what that business was. Either answer or admit you were
using city resources for unauthorized purposes. Morrison's voice cracks. I was meeting Mrs. Castellano regarding a personal matter. What kind of personal matter requires a city vehicle in the middle of a workday at a councilman's residence? Your Honor, I'd rather not discuss this in open court, but you came prepared to argue your use was justified. You referenced your medals, your relationships with officials, so now answer my questions or I'll hold you in contempt. Morrison is fully flushed now. We were having a personal conversation. What kind? Morrison's next words are barely audible. Mrs. Castellano and I have been seeing each other for the past 6 months. The courtroom erupts into chaos, people gasping, talking over each other. Santos stands and quickly exits. So, let me understand, Chief Morrison. For 6 months, you've been having an affair with Councilman Castellano's wife. You've regularly used city vehicles to visit her during work hours, and when cited, rather than pay the fine, you decided to fight it by claiming emergency authority and official business. In fighting this $85 ticket, you've now admitted under oath to misuse of city property, abuse of position, and an affair, representing massive conflict of interest given the councilman's oversight of your budget. But Judge Caprio isn't finished. Chief Morrison, I took the liberty of making phone calls before today's hearing. Morrison's eyes go wide. I spoke with Deputy Chief Santos yesterday. She provided information about internal complaints filed against you over 8 months, complaints about resource abuse, inappropriate conduct, and using your position to intimidate subordinates who questioned your behavior. Morrison looks sick. Furthermore, I spoke with the city ethics commissioner, who informed me of 3 separate anonymous complaints that mysteriously disappeared before investigation. And most interesting, I spoke this morning with Councilman Castellano. Morrison's face goes completely white. He didn't know about his wife's affair until I called him an hour ago. But what's fascinating is what else he told me. You've been pressuring him for months to approve an unnecessary equipment purchase from a vendor owned by your brother-in-law. When he started asking questions, you threatened him. You told him you had connections throughout government, and it would be unfortunate if questions about his personal life became public. You've been blackmailing a city councilman, Chief Morrison, using your affair with his wife as leverage to approve corrupt equipment purchases. And when you got this parking ticket, you were so arrogant, you decided to fight rather than pay and keep your misconduct hidden. Morrison is visibly shaking. Your Honor, please, I can explain. Explain what? How you betrayed your oath? How you used heroism as a shield for corruption? How you thought threatening a councilman would go unpunished because you have medals. Judge Caprio stands his full authority on display. You walked in here wearing that uniform with pride, displaying those medals prominently, referencing 20 years of service as if they granted immunity. But you've demonstrated that sometimes the most dangerous public servants are those who believe heroism in one area excuses corruption in others. The judge walks directly in front of Morrison. You saved lives, Chief. That's real. That's admirable.
Those medals represent genuine bravery, but they don't represent a license to cheat, steal, blackmail, or abuse your position. Chief Morrison, I am finding you guilty of the parking violation. The $85 fine is now $2,500 because of your attempted deception. Furthermore, I'm holding you in contempt for your refusal to answer questions and attempts to intimidate judicial proceedings. That's an additional $1,500. But more importantly, I'm referring this entire matter to the Rhode Island Attorney General's Office for Criminal Investigation into misconduct in office, abuse of public resources, and attempted blackmail. I'm forwarding a complete transcript to the fire department with my judicial recommendation that you be immediately suspended pending full internal affairs investigation. And I'm notifying the City Ethics Commission to investigate how 3 ethics complaints against you disappeared. Judge Caprio returns to his bench. Chief Morrison, 20 years ago you took an oath to serve and protect. Today you've revealed that somewhere along the way you stopped serving and started taking. You stopped protecting and started exploiting. You stopped being a public servant and became someone who used heroism as camouflage for corruption. Your badges and medals represent real sacrifices by real heroes, but you've tarnished them by hiding behind them while betraying everything they represent. This court is adjourned. The gavel comes down with finality. But the story doesn't end there. As Morrison stood, barely able to remain upright, the courtroom doors burst open. Deputy Chief Santos re-entered, followed by 3 Providence police detectives and an assistant attorney general. "Chief Daniel Morrison," a detective announced, "you're under arrest for misconduct in office, theft of services, and attempted extortion of a public official." The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Morrison, still wearing his metal-covered uniform, was handcuffed and read his Miranda rights as he was led past Caprio's bench. Morrison looked up. "Your Honor," he said, voice broken, "I'm sorry, I know." But sorry doesn't undo the damage. Chief, you had every opportunity to do the right thing. You chose to compound mistakes with threats and deception. Now, you'll face consequences. Within 3 hours, local news stations broadcast Morrison's arrest. The Providence Journal's headline, "Hero Fire Chief Arrested After Courtroom Confession." City Council held an emergency session that evening. Councilman Castellano gave an emotional statement about Morrison's threats and blackmail attempts. The equipment purchase Morrison pushed would have cost taxpayers $3.7 million for trucks that experts said were overpriced by $800,000. Morrison's brother-in-law's company would have received $200,000 commission. It wasn't just an affair, Castellano told the council, voice shaking. It was conspiracy to defraud taxpayers, a scheme using my personal life as leverage. This man wore a hero's uniform while conducting himself like a criminal. Within 24 hours, Morrison was placed on unpaid leave. Santos was named acting fire chief. An independent investigation revealed Morrison had cultivated relationships with city officials, using his heroic reputation to build political capital. When questioned, he'd reference his medals, his service, his connections, the implicit message, "I'm untouchable." 2 weeks after arrest, Morrison appeared in Superior Court for arraignment. Gone was the pristine uniform, replaced by an ill-fitting suit. Gone was confident posture, replaced by hunched shoulders. He pleaded not guilty, but evidence was overwhelming. City vehicle logs, Santos's testimony, recordings of threatening calls to Castellano, and, most damning, his own sworn testimony in Caprio's courtroom. Morrison's attorney negotiated a plea deal. He'd plead guilty to misconduct and theft of resources in exchange for dropping extortion charges. Morrison would serve 18 months, pay $47,000 restitution for vehicle misuse, forfeit his pension, and be permanently barred from public office or employment in Rhode Island. At sentencing, Morrison made a brief statement. "I betrayed the trust of citizens I swore to serve. I betrayed firefighters who served under my command and deserved better leadership. I betrayed the values those medals were supposed to represent. I thought my past heroism gave me permission to cut corners, bend rules, put my personal interests ahead of public duties. I was wrong. Acting Chief Santos held a department-wide meeting. "I know Morrison's arrest shook your faith in leadership," she told assembled firefighters, "but understand something. His heroism was real. Lives he saved were real. Fires he fought were real. But that doesn't excuse what he became. We wear these uniforms because we've earned public trust. Every time we respond, every time we put ourselves in danger, we reinforce that trust. What Morrison did was use that trust as a shield for corruption. He took respect you earned through bravery and exploited it for personal benefit. Moving forward, complete transparency in vehicle usage, mandatory ethics training, regular audits, and a clear message. Your heroism in fighting fires doesn't give you permission to break laws or abuse authority elsewhere." The firefighters gave her a standing ovation. 6 months later, Judge Caprio received a letter from young firefighter James Chen, who'd been present that day. "Your Honor," it began, "I wanted to thank you for what you did. Chief Morrison was my hero. When I heard he was arrested, I was devastated. But then I watched the hearing recording. I heard how you held him accountable while acknowledging his genuine service. I realized real heroism doesn't mean you can't make mistakes, but how you correct them is what really counts."
Heroism isn't about being perfect. It's about being accountable. The badge and medals don't make you special. They make you responsible. Thank you for teaching me that before I made Morrison's mistakes. Judge Caprio kept that letter in his desk. Years later, when asked about the case, he'd read it to visitors. This is why we hold people accountable, not to destroy them, but to preserve integrity of systems good people depend on. Morrison saved lives, and those lives are still saved. But if we'd let him continue using heroism as an excuse for corruption, eventually he would have destroyed the institution he claimed to serve. By holding him accountable, we protected all firefighters who serve with honor. We reinforced that public service is sacred trust, not license for personal benefit. And we sent a message that no one, no matter how many medals they wear, is above the law. The video was viewed over 3.8 million times in the first month. Police and fire academies used it as a teaching tool about warning signs of corruption, dangers of believing heroism grants immunity, and importance of maintaining ethical boundaries regardless of accomplishments. The Providence Fire Department under Santos became a model of ethical behavior
for accountability and transparency. 5 years after his release, Daniel Morrison took a job as a construction worker in a small Rhode Island town. He lived quietly, avoided publicity, worked hard to rebuild his life. The medals that once covered his chest were packed in a box in his attic, symbols of a past life and lessons learned too late. For Judge Caprio, the Morrison case was simply another day of holding people accountable with fairness and clarity, regardless of status. When reporters asked about it, his response was characteristically simple. Chief Morrison thought his medals made him special. I had to remind him that in a courtroom, everyone is equal. The badge doesn't grant privileges, it creates responsibilities. And when someone in authority abuses that authority, consequences must be swift and certain. Otherwise, we're not a nation of laws. We're a nation of men who believe their past justifies their present, and that's dangerous. This case stands as proof that true heroism and accountability walk in hand. They are not opposites. They complete one another. Because real heroes don't use their past service as a shield against the law. They use it as a reminder to live by it. The moment a badge, a title, or a medal becomes a reason to forget integrity, honor turns into arrogance, and respect turns into regret. That's the tragedy of Daniel Morrison. Not a villain, but a warning of what happens when pride overshadows principle. when authority is mistaken for immunity, and when the symbol of justice becomes heavier than the truth it's meant to serve. But in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, integrity always prevails. Through fairness, wisdom, and unwavering respect for the Constitution, he reminds us that the law serves everyone and exempts no one. Because in a world full of power struggles and broken ethics, Judge Caprio stands as proof that justice with compassion still exists. If you believe respect and integrity should always outweigh power, subscribe to Case Closed, where every verdict honors the legacy of Judge Caprio and the timeless truth that real authority begins with humility.